Welcome to The Explainer. I'm so glad you're here with us today because we are diving into an absolute epic, a 5 million-year evolutionary detective story. We're going to trace the incredible lineage of ancient canids and see exactly how nature forged some of the most dominant, adaptable predators this planet has ever seen. I'm talking, of course, about modern wolves and coyotes.
Okay, let's dive right into this. 5 million years. Just think about the sheer deep time scale of our story today. We're looking at a journey that spans literal eons, crosses multiple continents, and survives the most brutal ice age environments imaginable. It's a crazy story of genetic adaptability, some serious morphological upgrades, and a ruthless everyday fight for survival against massive prehistoric megafauna.
To give you a quick roadmap, here's what we're looking at today. We'll start with the Pliocene canid origins, then check out the great wolf and coyote split. From there, we'll briefly explore coyotes in North America, witness the massive Eurasian wolf event, and finally, track the rise of modern-sized wolves. Nice, linear, and easy to follow.
All right, Section 1, the Pliocene Canid origins. Let's head deep into the past and see exactly where it all began.
This timeline right here perfectly illustrates our chronological map. We start with a shared Pliocene ancestor 5 million years ago, push right through major evolutionary explosions like the Eurasian wolf event, and hit the explicit divergence of coyotes and wolves around 1.5 million years ago. And finally, we see the arrival of the massive Canis lupus reaching its modern sizes about 400,000 years ago.
So everything begins right here. Long before those massive pack-hunting wolves existed, there was Canis lepophagus, which translates literally to the hair-eating dog. This was a relatively humble, medium-sized canid, living right here in North America. But, do not underestimate this little guy. This creature was the foundational biological blueprint for the entire Canis genus. It carried the raw genetic potential that would eventually, conquer the entire northern hemisphere.
Moving on to Section 2, the wolf and coyote split. This is where we see some totally divergent evolutionary paths.
So the crucial point is this brings us to a massive, continental-scale gamble. It's kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure moment for these ancient dogs. One branch of descendants stayed right at home in the Americas, navigating a landscape already absolutely packed with terrifying predators. That evolutionary path led directly to the coyote. But another branch, they took a wildly different route, migrating all the way across the Bering Land Bridge into the vast expanses of Eurasia. And out there, those immigrant canids faced completely new pressures that would literally forge them into wolves.
This split in the fossil record, which crystallized roughly 1.5 million years ago during the transition into the Pleistocene, permanently separated two very famous cousins. The lineage that became the coyote was basically marooned in the Americas, while the lineage destined to become the gray wolf was unleashed upon the Old World. So next time you see a coyote or a wolf, just remember that their completely different survival tactics all started right here at this ultimate fork in the road.
Which brings us to Section 3, coyotes in North America. Let's see what happened to the lineage that stayed behind.
Get this. When paleontologists dig into the famous Rancho La Brea tar pits, coyote bones are the third most common fossil found there. Number 3. The only predators with more remains in the tar are the massive extinct dire wolves, scientifically known as Acinetocondyrus, and the saber-toothed cats. That tells us that Pleistocene coyotes were incredibly abundant and wildly successful survivors in a literal land of giants.
But listen, the Pleistocene coyote was definitely not the small, solitary scavenger we usually picture today. Since they were actively competing with the massive Canids, these Ice Age coyotes had to be way larger and much more powerful. They rocked bigger jaws and teeth specifically designed to crush thick megafauna bone. And they likely lived in larger packs to hunt juvenile megafauna, like early Pleistocene horses and llamas. It was really only after the massive megafauna extinction that they shrank down to the highly adaptable modern size we see today.
All right, jumping over to Section 4, the Eurasian wolf event. Talk about an evolutionary explosion. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what's happening over in the Old World. Around 1.8 million years ago, the fossil record suddenly lights up with a massive explosion known as the wolf event. Sudden, incredibly severe climate shifts and advancing continental glaciation acted as the ultimate evolutionary catalyst for those immigrant canids that had crossed the land bridge. They were essentially forced to rapidly adapt to a chilling new world. And man, that chilling new world was the mammoth steppe.
Try to picture this: a vast, dry, brutally cold, and totally unforgiving landscape stretching all the way from Spain to Alaska. Just endless, freezing plains populated by enormous grazing megafauna. For the small ancestral canids arriving there, the rules of the game were incredibly simple: grow larger and stronger to take down this massive prey, or face immediate extinction. There was no middle ground.
Let's move to and see how this builds, tracing the direct morphological stepping stones. We start with Canis etruscus, the Etruscan wolf, which appears as a small, wolf-like dog. Then, this lineage morphs into Canis mosbachensis, the mossbach wolf. This guy was a highly successful, slightly larger scavenger, adapting to the steppe. And finally, from this mossbach lineage, the true, highly social, large gray wolf emerges, Canis lupus. That leads us perfectly into Section 5, Rise of Modern-Sized Wolves, the making of an absolute apex predator. Tracking this physical growth reveals what was basically a desperate evolutionary arms race. We start pretty small with Canis etruscus, then we move up to the mid-sized Canis mosbachensis, topping out around 35 kilograms. But you have to consider their competition. They were dealing with predators like lycaonoidus, a massive Eurasian wild dog with bone-crushing jaws that absolutely dominated the landscape. For the emerging Canis lupus to survive and eventually thrive in the late Pleistocene, it had to desperately size up. It had to become massive enough to directly rival bear-sized cave lions and that terrifying lycaon wild dog. In reaching that modern size, it wasn't just about getting taller. It required extreme biological upgrades. We're talking a massive increase in raw body mass. It meant developing shorter, wider jaws capable of shattering megafauna bone. But crucially, it required advanced social cognition, allowing them to form highly coordinated packs that could number several dozen individuals. These specific and tense adaptations were absolutely mandatory for Canis lupus to conquer the mammoth steppe.
The brutal reality here is that the expansion of Canis lupus was devastating to its rivals. As the wolf rapidly increased its body size, its pack numbers, and its global dominance, its fiercest canine rival, that massive wild dog lycaon, was utterly outcompeted. The descendants of lycaon, which we know today as dholes, were actively pushed into the shadows. They were forced to literally reduce their body size and retreat into isolated mountain and forest environments just to survive the wolf's ecological takeover. And so, Canis lupus claimed absolute global dominance. It's just a truly incredible journey, isn't it? Going from humble, small Pliocene dog eating hares in North America to a massive, highly social apex predator, perfectly engineered by the freezing Eurasian steppes. Armed with modern sizes and complex pack dynamics, Canis lupus was so incredibly successful that it eventually crossed back over the Bering Land Bridge. It returned to North America to conquer the very continent its ancestors had left millions of years prior. Talk about a comeback story.
The story of these ancient canids leaves us with a profound realization. Evolutionary survival is never a guarantee. Instead, it's a ruthless transaction requiring the perfect calibration of body size, complex social structures, and absolute ecological flexibility just to outlast the giants of the Ice Age.